During Gray's The Insulated World is one of the most emotional, powerful, intense, demanding, polarizing, and utterly frustrating records that I have ever loved as much as I love this record. Want to hear more of what I have to say in a very unconventional review for a record? I'll see you inside. What is up, everyone, and welcome back. The Insulated World by Duran Gray is their 10th record. It was released on 26 September of 2018. And it can be seen as a return to form. It can be seen as a departure of sound. It can be viewed as many things. In my personal case, it is a incredibly intense, powerful, soul-ripping, emotional, yet polarizing and incredibly frustrating, yet glorious and amazing record. And as a Duran Gray fan, I think most of you have felt a lot of those similar emotions. You may have, you may not, I could be wrong. But Duran Gray gives you so many different feelings, different emotions in their music, and this album is one that I have loved and hated and loved and hated and enjoyed and liked and loved and hated and eventually just absolutely adored as I've gone through the listening process. I've listened to this record an easy 160, 170, 180 plus times, probably close to 170 to 180, like full listens, not just individual tracks, but listening to this record as a whole. And that's where the frustrating part comes in at points. Because this record has some absolutely incredible tracks, some amazing tracks, some of my favorite tracks that I've heard from Duran Gray. That said, I have still not covered the full catalog yet because I want to do that on the channel because so many of you love that. So, I haven't got the full record, but you do hear a lot of those eras. You hear some of the gauze, the macabre, a bit of that withering to death, some of the more progressive elements of Marrow and DSS, and little subtle touches of Arake. But this is a very stripped down record. It's a very bleak record emotionally. It's a very self-deprecating record as far as lyrical content from Kyo. And as you get through it, I find that in full listens, the record can drag a little because you do get a lot of those really straightforward, especially towards the back half of the record. It's very straightforward, chugging, groove-heavy tracks like Utafumi and Downfall and Kegu no Yoku and Zetsunai, and more on those in a little bit. Vocally, the record is stunning. Kyo continues on what he's been doing with all those really off-key, emotionally charged vocal lines, vocal passages. His full range is on display throughout the record. That beautiful falsetto that is just so odd and discomforting to those low and high growls, some of that cupped lower end vocal attack. And when he goes into certain parts, I just feel like the emotions are getting ripped out of me. They said they wanted to go darker on this record. They said they wanted to strip it down, and they certainly did. Very first record, Kibitsu, it's thrashy, it's groovy, it's got some of those death metal influences. And while I think it's a very solid opener, I enjoy the track, the album really opens up for me at the very next one with Devote My Life. It is one of those things that I absolutely love about Duran Gray. It's dark, it's brooding, it's moody, it's got these amazing dissonant riffs, these gigantic grooves. The entire band's strengths are played to you here. There are some fantastic drum patterns on the toms and the cymbals from Shinya, and every band member is playing the strings. There's a great bass line from Tosha, who I absolutely love. I think he's an utterly incredible bass player. You slide into one of the really emotional tracks. Nigan Wukaburo has one of my absolute favorite choruses on that record, and it's kind of similar when you get up to Utafumi. There's similar notes or similar influences in the chorus. They're not the same chorus, but they do have some of the same hallmarks. But when he gets up into when Kyo gets up into those higher registers, and he's really laying in those gorgeous falsettos and those high, painful, emotional vocals that only Kyo is capable of doing, it's just painful. And it's painful in a glorious way. Like, I'm able to release what I am feeling through what he's conveying to the listener. Absolutely amazing stuff. Celebrate Empty Howls is really strong. You can hear some of the new wave Swedish death metal influences, meaning you get a lot of those melodic, tremolo-picked riffs that you expect from bands like Dark Tranquillity and In Flames and earlier Soilwork. You get these drenched, trash can drum sounds, massive tom fills. There's this really, really slick section at 117 where it drops out. You get these haunting vocals, some of those dissonant riffs, and it follows back with grooves. It smacks you in the face and just hammers on you. Inafumi is one of those tracks that frustrated the hell out of me when I first listened to it. And the reason is because I, as a fan, as a musician, I grew up and became very familiar with my own playing, expected certain aggressive styles, aggressive passages to sound a certain way. Utafumi had that very familiar Duran Gray chug and groove. The drums were very simple. And too simple for me. The more I listened to it, the more I really enjoyed it. And I waffle back and forth. Do I like this? Do I not like this? Is it too simple? Is it not complex enough? All these different feelings every time I listen to the track. Finally, it just clicked. And I think that's one of the things that I truly adore about Duran Gray is they're not an easy band to listen to. They're not an easy band to like right off the bat for most listeners. It takes time. It takes listening to the tracks. It takes experiencing it. It takes letting yourself open up and feel the music and not just hear it and listen to the technical aspects. It's really allowing yourself to fully embrace the experience as a human, from both the intelligent side and the emotional side, letting all that stuff come together. And when it finally does, the chorus hits, and then I'm waiting for those big, crunchy, powerful riffs to come in. and that I'm happy when they do. And suddenly, it goes from a track that I didn't think was very strong and I didn't really love to a track that I truly enjoy. And it's just one of those glorious things about the band. Oh, Aka. Rubber Sheep, the track after Fumi is good, but it's not a track that I feel is a highlight for me in the record. Aka, on the other hand, Aka really reminds me a lot of early Duran Gray. It reminds me of something I might even hear off of Gauze in some ways. It has those gorgeous, layered, chimey acoustic guitars and those clean passages. This just sonic beauty with all these layering has some of my absolute favorite vocals on the record. The lyrics are incredibly powerful. It's a track that myself and others have had conversations but truly believe is probably a Guru track as opposed to a Die track. But it's just the hallmarks in the writing. He's a bit more intricate. There's this gorgeous falsetto in the chorus. The hooks are just utterly massive. It's an incredibly emotional release for me, and I think the track contains Shinya's best drum performances on the record. His tom patterns, his cymbal fills have really inspired. The guy is truly in his element as a player, and is absolutely my favorite solo on the record. There's a bit of technique there. It's incredibly expressive, but it just plays with the track. It plays on the heartstrings, and it's so much of what I love about Duran Gray. Values of Madness. Values of Madness is easily, in my opinion, the most fun track on the record. It has kind of a Duran Sevenfold feeling, that cross between what you expect from Duran Gray, mixed with the Avenged Sevenfold grooves, some of that style of vocals. It's got this really awesome rap part and delivery, especially as it comes out of the initial into that passage. You get this effect drenched vocal with some cool reverb and delay on it, and then it kicks into that raunchy pseudo hair metal riff, and I just love it. I love that slash throat grit that Kyo's able to get in the vocal performance. Big, driving, aggressive bass lines from Toshio with some really cool picking hand stuff that he's doing. And it's that when I need a quick Duran Gray fix, that's the track that I go to. But I don't want to be bombarded with the emotion of tracks like Behind the Vacant Image or Blossoming Beelzebub or Rinkaku or Venushka or Aka or Jessica or Jealous, something like that. This track is one of those I need instant Duran Gray gratification values of madness. So I find myself reaching for a lot of this album because of the accessibility of it compared to some of the other stuff. Another one of the tracks I love on the record, but I love it more if I'm just listening to it on its own as opposed to inside the album context or as the album as a whole. Like if I'm listening to the album straight through, by the time I get to it, I'm exhausted. But I love Downfall. I think it is one of the best tracks on the record. Certainly one of my favorite tracks on the record. But it does fall into that blueprint of those big, heavy Duran Gray grooves. There's a lot of you get some of that DSS feeling as it's got a massive new wave of Swedish death metal feel with the tremolo pick riffs, these gigantic grooves. And there's this really awesome tom pattern by Shinya in part of the track, really driving grooves to it, bookended by some really great vocals from Kyo and some fantastic bass playing. But when I listened to it in the album coming out of Values into Downfall, I'm exhausted because we've got a lot of similar tracks with the earlier stuff like Kimitsu, Devote My Life, Celebrate Empty Howls, Itafumi, Rubbish Heap. You've already got so much of that style that it's hard to listen to it and love it as much as I do by itself in the context of the record. I wish they probably would have fixed the track, or not fixed, but changed the track order, the running order of how the tracks are set to move that a little bit further up the record instead of loading it on the back half. And that's another one of those frustrating things about the record for me as a listener. The following two tracks, Kigaku no Yoku and Zetsunai, they're solid tracks. There's nothing that really blows me away about them, but they're solid tracks, but they do contain a lot of the similarities of that stripped down sound from the rest of the record. And by the time I'm getting to them, in the album context as a whole, I'm a bit worn down. The album finishes out with Vernaculus, and I absolutely love the track. Very early during Gray feel. It's something I so desperately hoped for. I truly wanted a track like this on the record. I wanted a very ballady track that screamed, I sound like I should be on Gauze. And it has a lot of those hallmarks for me. It's got a beautiful modern alt rock feel. It's a massive chorus, and it has that duality that I love so much in a lot of Visual K, where you have the music feels very good. It's heartwarming. You get that feel good moment musically, and even vocally at points. But the lyrics are absolutely soul crushing. It's so self-deprecating, so painful to listen to Kyo admit some of or see him with those lyrics and saying some of the things that he says. It's a very painful lyric track from a lyrical standpoint, and I adore it. I absolutely love it, and it closes out the record in an amazing way. So overall, I think 9 tracks out of the 13 are amazing. But they're not bad. Some of you guys are going to disagree. They might be some of your favorite tracks. But truly, I feel like this album could have been stripped a little bit. I feel like you could have cut it down to 9 or 10 tracks, and it would have had a bit more of that impact. And that was one of those things that I kept waffling on when, how am I going to rate this and review this, is I feel like that's one of the weaknesses. I feel like there's a little bit of filler on the record as opposed to all the tracks being really strong. And During Grade do have a habit of releasing overly long records. Or not overly long, but longer records in that 45, 50, 60 plus minute range. And that's great when all the material is strong as it can be, but some of the tracks really do drag on. And mix-wise, Two Madsons hit or miss for me. I feel like this record really does benefit from having a better sound system or a fantastic pair of headphones. Listening to this on high-quality Sony studio headphones like I use for all of my listening experiences, or sometimes high-quality studio monitors, the songs sound really good other than some little things, like some of the frequencies breaking, some peaks and some cracking. I do feel like the drums are mixed very forward too forward for my personal preference, especially where as simple as they get at points. And I feel like the guitars sometimes, in personal preference here, I feel like they're a little dry. I wouldn't mind it if a little dry, a little brittle. They're tuning low. They're using those big extended range guitars that they have been using for quite some time now, like in riffs like on Utafumi or Downfall. Those tones are very dry, very brittle sounding. So I wouldn't have minded hearing a little bit more warmth in there, possibly even a little bit more mid to help richen that up and fill it out a little bit more. But I probably would have liked hearing this record more if somebody like Josh Wilder would have mixed it, because he's a bit more organic in his sounds. 2 has a lot of those hallmarks. He loves the massive vocal layering. He loves gigantic guitar layers. His drums tend to be way up forward, and it just tends to have a very sterile, clinical feel. And I don't really think that Duran Gray shine mixed that way. I feel like they sound so much better live than they do in the studio, and part of that is because of T Madsen mixes. And I'm just not a fan of his mixes in general with a lot of the bands he's worked for. And there's the weakness for me that I've been a long time voice about, is Shinya. I love Shinya in a progressive or rock context. When he's playing rock and he's playing progressive, he's allowed to really shine his hand, show off his hands. Great big tom fills, killer cymbal work, really do stuff up top, meaning your snare, your cymbal work, your toms, your floor toms, whatnot. He's great with his hands. He's not so good with his feet. And he kind of has that deer in headlights feel when he's forced to play fast. When he has to play a passage that is fast, he completely oversimplifies the drum pattern. He is stuck with very rudimentary, very simple D beats, where drummers that are a bit more technical when it comes to their footwork or the mixing of their footwork and their hands together will use more double bass and make the song more lively and move it along a bit better. And they'll throw in cool patterns with the double bass drum work to break it up. When he's forced to play fast, it's just really simple and it gets a little boring for me. And I've been critical of that since the very first time that I listened to these guys. So that was one of those things that was frustrating. At the same time, there are so many songs on the record that are so strong and connect so heavily on an emotional level that eventually I was able to move past that. I still think it's a weakness on the record, and I always will. But this record is so rewarding when you allow it to linger, when you continue to go back to it and continue to try to listen to it and continue to try to find your love for it, because eventually it'll click. At least it did for me. And that's why I feel like this review is a little different. So I wanted to explain the process. I mean, I went the first 20 or so listens, I was like, I really like it. It's really good. And then I'm like, no, I don't. There's this flaw. There's that flaw. I don't like this. I don't like that. It doesn't feel right. Then I love it again. And then I don't love it. And then I love it again. And then I was like, oh, it's good. And then finally, it's somewhere in the 115, 120 listen range. It's like, it was that whole moment of, wow, this record is incredible. And I absolutely love it. It'll make you continue to think wonderful things or not so wonderful things, depending on how you listen to music. You could listen to music very differently than I do, and you could love it straight off the bat. You could listen to music very differently than I do and despise it. But I think it's an incredible record. Even though there are some holes, it's a rewarding record if you listen to it long enough and really let those songs take a hold of you. But I feel like you're only going to get that true reward if you can connect with it on an emotional level. If you're just listening to it on a technical level, you're not going to like the record. So overall, it's a fantastic record. Even with all of its flaws, it's still beautiful. And I struggled with ratings, but I give it a 9.4 as a base rating. And depending on the day, depending on the week, depending on the mood, it gets as high as about a 9.8 for me. At the moment, having just listened to it a couple more times, it's at a 9.8. It might drop back down to a 9.5. It might drop back down to a 9.4. But it's a fantastic record. It's a really strong record. Definitely one of the better records that I listened to last year. And it's a record that as many records I have listened to since that for review and reaction purposes, I still come back to it. I still love it. And it's still one that continues to resonate with me almost 11 months later, 10 and a half months later. So, thanks guys. I hope you enjoyed the review. Now that I've had the amount of time that I felt like I needed to truly be able to do the record as much justice as it deserves. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if your opinion on the record has changed after many different varied listens. And are there, like with me, are there tracks that you like on their own as opposed to in the context of listening to the record straight through? Are there tracks that you like listening to the record straight through that don't necessarily hold up as much on their own? I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. So let me know in the comments. Thank all of you so much. Thank you so much support from the Duran Gray fans that have helped build this channel over the past many months. I love you guys. Thank you to my law enforcement, military, veterans, first responders for what you do every single day. And as always, you have been awesome. I have been Bald Man. I'll see you in the next one. Be excellent to each other and keep headbanging.